In the 21st century, the world is being irreversibly Asianized. This is what American international relations specialist Parag Khanna predicted in his 2019 best-selling book, The Future is Asian. As countries around the world strive to fight both the virus and protect their economies, the COVID-19 pandemic is bringing new dimensions to the argument. How is the pandemic changing the future for Asia and its relationship with the rest of the world? I'm pleased to be able to join by Dr. Parag Khanna himself, founder and managing partner of FutureMap, a strategic advisory firm. He's joining us via Skype from Singapore. Parag, it's great to have you back on the show. So in your book, The Future is Asian, published in 2019, you emphasize the rise of Asia, saying the 21st century will be the century of Asia. Well, some people would say no and no way. Now, 2 years on, we are suffering from the pandemic and the economic fallout, and there is a new administration in the United States, plus other developments. Do you still hold that belief that we're being irreversibly Asianized, I mean, for the rest of the world?
Absolutely. And first of all, thank you so much for having me back on the program. It's nice to be with you again. The thesis about the centrality of Asia very much stands because, of course, China in particular and Asia in general remains the only region that will have any economic growth above and beyond the 2019 level this year and in the coming several years. So obviously the trend towards Asianization and Asia centrality is reinforced by this tragic pandemic. And there's many other metrics that we can look at. Of course, the success of Asian governments in having a respect for authority, in following the medical and technological kinds of procedures and political, if you will, requirements and social requirements to suppress the pandemic. Asian countries have done the best job of having the minimal loss of life per million people and the lowest reduction in their economic growth. So by many, many metrics, this has been a learning experience for the world, that Asian types or styles of government, technocratic in particular, have performed extremely well.
Well, indeed, Asian countries have, in general, managed to keep their numbers of COVID cases and casualties lower than many other continents around the world, with some exceptions, some doing better than others, of course, within Asia. But help us understand, is there some kind of overarching Asian way that's different than other ways fighting the pandemic? And give us some specific examples if you can.
It's a very good question. And let's remember that this Asian region is incredibly diverse. It represents well over 4 billion people, all different kinds of regimes, very different cultures and civilizations. So it's very difficult to speak of an Asian way. But in the book, I do talk about what I call the 3 new Asian values. And the first value is the one that we just discussed, a certain degree of deference or technocratic authority, an executive leadership that has a long-term vision, a plan for modernization, a high degree of public trust in that authority because it is delivering on the overall welfare for the population. The second is mixed capitalism, and this is also relevant to the pandemic. First of all, what it means is that both the state and the private sector work together to steer the economy, to drive innovation, to create jobs. There is a national loyalty as well to certain firms. I think that's also very important. This mixed capitalism is not something that Asians debate whether it is right or wrong. They accept it and embrace it. And it is the correct way for public-private cooperation in the economy. Now, of course, when it comes to the pandemic, this means that companies that develop vaccines or logistics companies that can distribute them, everyone plays a positive role. Everyone is trying to contribute to the solution. And the third, very quickly, is what I call social conservatism. Again, being cautious about and having a certain sense of collective duty. Of course, we associate that already with Confucianism, but more broadly to something that even non-Confucian societies have rallied behind, in the sense that one does not have to convince many people in Asia that they should stay home, they should not go out and party, they should wear masks, that we have a duty to each other. And this is fairly natural. Now, of course, there was the SARS experience of 2003, but of course, this cultural mentality long predates the SARS epidemic as well. So again, technocratic governance, mixed capitalism, social conservatism, these are the three new Asian values. What I found, again, is that it really cuts across our many different cultures and types of government in Asia.
That's really fascinating. On the other hand, from the point of view of being a devil's advocate, are there any weaknesses at all about being Asian, and have any such weaknesses been exposed during the course of the past 1.5 years, let's say?
Well, let's remember that Asia is a region of tremendous inequality, right? Asia has most of the world's poor people, even as it has 1/3 or more of the world's rich people. If Asia were a country, or if even Southeast Asia, this ASEAN region of 700 million people, if it were one country, it would be by far the most unequal country in the world, because you have Singapore and Brunei with billionaires, and you have Myanmar or East Timor and Papua New Guinea, some of the poorest countries in the world. So we still have a very high degree of inequality. There are many poor people. A lot of work still has to be done to raise the floor, to provide equal opportunity. But I will say that all of us can remember, perhaps, the Asian financial crisis of 1998, the global financial crisis of 2008, and now the pandemic. And in the last 20 years, what I want to give Asian governments and societies credit for is learning from shocks, learning from disruptions, learning from big challenges that have come up. So whether it is flexible exchange rates, or investing in mobile banking, or providing subsidies for farmers. So many things have been learned and adapted and integrated. And one of the things that's important to remember that Asians have learned to integrate better with each other over the last 20 years, which is to say that at times like this, during a pandemic, when global trade has been switched off in stop-start, haphazard kinds of ways because of supply chains and markets and logistics, Asians have realized we need to open more to each other, trade more with each other, invest more in each other. And therefore, it was a big surprise for many people that Asian governments, including China, of course, were able to agree to the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership at the end of last year. Yeah. So it's remarkable that in the middle of a pandemic that this could happen. And yet it is not a surprise, because it is a demonstration that Asians have been learning the lessons from the last several crises.
Yeah, well, some people will say, are you saying that people in other parts of the world are not able to have the kind of resilience or have the ability to correct themselves or to learn from these mistakes? People will say it is not fair for you to exclude them of that kind of ability.
Well, it's quite frankly actually a very ironic question you're asking, because generally speaking, Western commentators and academics and theorists would look at Asian governments and see very rigid systems. And therefore, they would say that Asians lack resilience. Let's remember that Asian societies have been the ones in the mainstream global discourse that have been accused of not having resilience because, again, they are either authoritarian or not sufficiently democratic, or again, opaque, if you will, and so forth, and therefore not dynamic. So it's a very ironic question, because of course now this pandemic has shown that Asian societies are more resilient, whereas more open societies that have had a bit too much freedom in this kind of situation have not done particularly well. And so it's really has flipped on its head this question about who is resilient and who is not resilient. We can take just one quick example, which is Switzerland. Switzerland is the world's foremost democracy, but it has done a very terrible job with this pandemic. They have allowed each of the 26 provinces, known as cantons, to make their own policy about who will lock down, who will not lock down.
I get your point, yeah. Parag, I get your point. Time is very limited, but I do want to chip in here. Although people will say now this is an extraordinary situation, this is a crisis period of time. In a normal period of time, these democratic systems are functioning properly, and you are not going to expect that a crisis is going to be the normal for the future. So it is probably not fair to expect these societies to always, function perfectly. Or always make mistakes in the future. This is one thing. And secondly, people would say, I'm not going to follow those values that you just described, like respect for authority or mixed capitalism or social conservatism. They have a right, they will say, to follow their style. Why do you say the world has to become more Asian?
I would never say that the world has to become more Asian. I would say, in fact, that Asia and many Asian societies have learned the lessons from centuries of Western colonialism. In fact, they have learned the lessons about how to invest in modern infrastructure, how to have a strong public sector and civil service, how to invest in innovation and entrepreneurialism. Many of these things have been absorbed from experiencing global capitalism as exhibited by the United States and Europe. So I'm talking about a flow of conversation globally. And in which everyone has something to contribute. I'm not saying that anyone must become, Chinese or Asian in that way. Not at all. On your point about the test, this being such a severe and extreme moment, let me just ask the question rhetorically: if you cannot prove your resilience during a time of crisis, then where are you proving your resilience? The whole point of resilience is to bounce back better from a time of crisis. So this is the test, and this is the moment from which those countries, no matter what kind of society they are, no matter what kind of government, no matter what geography they are in, they need to learn lessons from what they did wrong during this crisis. So I will go back to the original point. The Asian sort of style of governance has been validated, has been strengthened, is certainly gaining more respect, quite frankly, globally, as a result of the pandemic. And we might see that other countries are going to learn from Asia. And that would be one small bit of progress.
It would be indeed fascinating if there could be a genuine dialogue between these different civilizations and a genuine look at what went wrong and what could be done better in the future. Anyways, we have to leave it there. Many thanks to Dr. Parag Khanna, founder and managing partner of FutureMap and author of the best-selling book, The Future is Asian. You have been watching The Point. We'll take a short break, and when we return, vaccine nationalism is preventing some countries from getting the doses they need to fight COVID-19. What's the impact on fighting the pandemic from the bigger picture perspective?